It was February 1957. In a cinder block machine shop on the edge of Decatur, Illinois, a rusted Farmall M axle shaft sat completely seized inside the press jaw, and Raymond Abgant had 48 hours before the farmer needed his tractor back in the field. The press wasn't working right. Its ram was slipping, dropping pressure the moment it bit into steel. Raymond had built that press himself 3 years earlier, from salvaged I-beam stock and a surplus hydraulic cylinder rated at approximately 20 tons of working force. Raymond pressed that ram down with both hands. Nothing. Zero movement. The Farmall's axle held. 48 hours. One machine. One man who had staked his entire shop's reputation on a press built from salvage and will. But to understand how this happened, we have to go back. Raymond Earl Abgant was born in 1921 in Pana, Illinois, a coal and corn town 40 miles east of Springfield, where men learned to fix machines before they ever learned to drive them. His father, Walter Abgant, ran a one-bay implement shed where he serviced John Deere two-cylinder tractors and Farmall regulars for the surrounding farms. Raymond was handing Walter tools by age 8. By 12, he could identify a seized valve stem by sound alone. By the time Raymond was 15, the Great Depression had stripped the Pana area of cash, but not of machines. Tractors still broke. Farmers still needed them running. Walter's shed stayed open, not because it was profitable, but because there was simply no one else. Raymond finished school in 1939. He didn't leave Pana. He stayed in the shed, worked beside his father, and learned something no trade school taught. Every tractor failure follows a pattern, and every pattern has a solution, if you have the right tool. His World War II interrupted everything. Raymond was drafted in the spring of 1942 and assigned as a motor pool mechanic with the U.S. Army, a role that took him to the Pacific Theater, maintaining diesel trucks, jeeps, and crawler tractors under field conditions far from any parts supply. He spent 3 years solving mechanical failures with improvised tools and whatever parts could be scavenged from disabled vehicles. No parts catalog, no machine shop, just the problem and whatever was at hand. It sharpened him in ways that peacetime never could have. He returned to Pana in the autumn of 1945. Walter's implement shed was still there, quieter now, fewer hands, older machines. Raymond picked up a wrench the morning after he arrived home. By afternoon, he was under a John Deere B with a seized rear axle. But something had changed in Raymond. He kept returning to one problem he'd seen dozens of times: pressed components that couldn't be separated without dedicated force. His wheel bearings, axle shafts, crankshaft gears, things a hammer would damage and a wrench could never reach. In 1948, Raymond Abgant rented a 900-square-foot cinder block building on East Center Street in Decatur, Illinois, and opened what he called, in a hand-painted sign above the door, Abgant Press Works. Population of Decatur at the time, approximately 66,000. Tractor repair shops in Macon County, 11. His first press was built from salvaged H-frame I-beam steel and a surplus hydraulic cylinder from a decommissioned factory press. Raymond calculated a working load capacity of approximately 20 tons, sufficient to press tractor axle shafts, wheel hubs, and seized bearing races without damaging surrounding metal. Raymond worked alone through the first winter. He charged $2 per press operation, a rate most farmers considered fair for something no other shop in Macon County could offer. By March of 1949, he had more work than one man could handle. He didn't raise prices. He worked longer hours. By the summer of 1950, Raymond had completed more than 80 individual press jobs, axle shafts, wheel bearings, crankshaft gears, and kingpins, on Farmall M, Farmall H, John Deere B, and Oliver 88 tractors that other Decatur shops had turned away as unworkable. Word spread fast, and the tractor dealers on North Water Street started routing jobs to Raymond that no one else in Macon County could handle. Axle shafts too corroded to pull by hand, crankshaft journals too seized for hammer work. Abgant's press became the last resort and the first call. In the spring of 1951, Raymond built his second press, heavier than the first, fabricated from thicker I-beam stock and fitted with a surplus cylinder sourced from a dismantled industrial stamping press in Champaign. As its working capacity reached approximately 30 tons. By 1952, Raymond had outgrown his original shop. He hired 2 assistants, Earl Pruitt, a former International Harvester line mechanic from Lincoln, Illinois, and a young welder named Dale Stinson, who had just completed his apprenticeship at a Decatur fabrication yard. The 3 of them could work 2 presses simultaneously, Raymond and Earl handling the heavy axle jobs while Dale fabricated press tooling and adapter plates from bar stock. Now, Abgant Press Works was no longer a one-man operation. It was becoming something else entirely. The Oliver 88 presented a particular problem. Its rear axle shaft, a solid steel rod running approximately 42 inches in length, would corrode into the axle tube after a single wet season, bonding with rust so completely that even Raymond's 20-ton press had initially struggled. Raymond's solution was a custom adapter plate, a thick steel disc machined to seat flush against the axle tube face, its distributing press force evenly across the full diameter rather than concentrating it at a single point. Dale Stinson fabricated the first one from a 1/4-inch plate in a single afternoon. The adapter plate worked on the first attempt. The Oliver 88 shaft released cleanly. No scoring to the axle tube bore, no damage to surrounding casting. Raymond had it on a shelf beside the press by the end of the week, ready for the next Oliver that came through the door. By 1954, Raymond had built a library of custom tooling, 14 distinct press plates, each sized and profiled for a specific tractor model and component type. He kept them on the wall above the press, labeled in his own hand. No catalog, no order system, just Raymond's memory and a grease pencil. Now we return to February 1957. Raymond had diagnosed the press failure. The internal cup seal in the hydraulic cylinder had degraded, bleeding pressure before the ram could build force. Yet he had 48 hours and exactly 1 spare seal, salvaged from a failed bottle jack, not a matched component. The spare seal wasn't a match, slightly larger in diameter, from a bottle jack rated at approximately 12 tons, not a press cylinder rated at 20. Raymond trimmed it with his pocket knife on the workbench. Earl Pruitt watched in silence for a long moment, then said quietly, "That'll hold for maybe 10 strokes." Raymond looked at the seal, looked at the axle still clamped in the press jaw above, said nothing. Yet he seated the trimmed seal back into the cylinder, reassembled the pump head carefully, and filled the reservoir with the last of the hydraulic fluid from the drum in the corner. Stroke 1. The ram moved. Stroke 2. Pressure held. Stroke 3. On the 4th stroke, the axle shaft shifted, barely 3 millimeters. But it shifted. Raymond kept both hands on the pump handle and did not stop. Slow, steady, 1 stroke at a time. By stroke 9, the Farmall M axle shaft broke free from the corroded hub seat with a sound like a rifle shot. The shaft dropped clean onto the press bed. Raymond released the pump handle. Earl Pruitt exhaled. Neither man said anything for a full 10 seconds. The farmer, Harold Sievers, a corn grower from the edge of Forsyth Township, had his tractor back in the farmyard by 7 the next morning. He told 3 men at the Forsyth grain elevator what Raymond's press had done. All 3 called Abgant Press Works within the week. Spring 1957 brought a full backlog. Raymond was booking press jobs 2 weeks in advance by April, a level of demand he had never seen in 9 years of operation. He moved additional adapter plates to permanent hooks above the main press. The wall above it was running out of room. Raymond hired a 3rd full-time hand that summer, a young mechanic named Gene Welch, who had just finished at a Case implement dealership in Springfield. Yet Gene brought experience with Case DC and SC tractors, expanding Abgant's capability into a model range the shop had rarely seen before. By 1958, Abgant Press Works had served farmers across 5 central Illinois counties. Raymond rarely left Decatur. He didn't need to. The machines came to him, loaded on flatbeds, hauled on trailers, sometimes driven directly into the shop still running rough from the field. Raymond Abgant never advertised. Not once. No trade publication listing. There's no county fair booth, no flyer at the co-op. Every job that came through his door came through a farmer who had talked to another farmer. That was the only marketing Abgant Press Works ever needed. He also never patented a design. The adapter plates, the press frame geometry, the seal trimming method, all of it stayed in Raymond's head, in Dale's hands, in the muscle memory of 3 men who had done the same jobs hundreds of times. The knowledge was the shop. The late 1950s brought a change in the tractor market. Larger, heavier machines were entering production. The Farmall 460, the John Deere 730, the Oliver 990. Rear axle shafts grew in diameter. Press loads increased. Raymond's 20-ton press was beginning to reach its practical limit. In 1959, Raymond built his third press, and his most capable. Constructed from 3-inch I-beam flanges and fitted with a rebuilt industrial cylinder sourced from a Decatur plant that had closed the previous year, this press was rated at approximately 40 tons of working load. By 1960, Abgant Press Works had 3 presses running, 4 employees, and a customer base spanning 5 counties. More than 340 individual farm customers, 12 implement dealerships, all of it built on one idea, and the machines Raymond built with salvaged steel and his own 2 hands. The 1960s brought consolidation to rural Illinois. Small farms merged into larger operations. Implement dealers opened satellite service bays with factory tooling. Factory-trained technicians arrived with factory specifications. Raymond's shop continued, but the calls from small individual farmers came less frequently. Raymond adjusted without complaint. He shifted focus toward implement dealers, performing press work on components arriving in bulk from multiple farms. One Oliver dealership in Taylorville began sending axle rebuilds exclusively to Abgant. A Farmall dealer in Sullivan did the same. Different work. Steady work. Earl Pruitt retired in 1965, yet after 13 years with the shop. Raymond gave him the original press, the 20-ton machine built from salvage in 1948, as a parting gift. Earl installed it at his property outside Lincoln and used it for another 12 years before it finally stopped holding pressure. Raymond continued through the late 1960s with a reduced crew, himself and Gene Welch. Dale Stinson had moved to a fabrication shop in Decatur's industrial district. The work was slower now, but the presses ran every day. Raymond opened the shop at 6 and closed it when the work was done. Raymond Abgant closed Abgant Press Works in 1971, at the age of 50. His tools and 3 remaining presses were purchased by a consolidating implement dealer in Taylorville, a firm that had been routing jobs to Raymond for over a decade. The sign above the door came down on a Tuesday in March. Raymond Abgant never sought recognition. He gave no interviews, appeared in no trade magazines, spoke at no agricultural shows. He returned to Pana in 1971 and is recorded in the Macon County Business Registry as having operated a press works for 23 consecutive years without interruption. Some of those presses are still out there, in implement sheds and restoration barns across central Illinois. Still pressing, still holding. Machines built from salvage, held together by one man's understanding that the right tool, built honest and built right, outlasts the hand that made it. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us preserve these machines and the histories behind them. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and whether you've ever worked beside a press like Raymond's.